Alright everybody, we are getting ready to get started with the fun part of putting a tank together. This is the part I actually like. I have got a big pile of rocks. I've got a big pile of sticks. I've already got a big old log and I got a great big tank waiting. So I am going to get started putting all this stuff together. I've got an idea of how I want it to look, but we've got a long way to go. It'll probably be days before I sort it all out and get it all set up exactly the way I like it. And, you know, I tweak this little rock and move that little branch and so on and so forth. But we're going to make a start on it tonight. And hopefully by the end of the evening I will be able to show you something at the tail end of this video. And we can say that that's a start. And hopefully it'll be something exciting and worth looking at. So sit tight, let me get started. And let's see what I come up with for my preliminary hardscape. Alright everybody, sorry I'm a little out of breath. I just want to shoot a little bit of video real quick without interrupting my flow here. A couple things to point out. If you're going to start putting big rocks in the tank, you want to remove some of the water. If you just start putting large objects in your tank, you're going to displace water and pretty soon it's going to be overflowing. That is pretty elementary, but I thought I would mention it just in case that's one of those things you overlook. The other thing is, I've had people suggest I use a hammer and break that other rock apart, the rock that I'd gotten that was too big for it. And I opted not to do that because of the way it was too big for it. I usually don't like to break rocks. I don't like the unnatural look. In this case, however, I did. I broke this rock up a little bit, and I gave it a couple of whacks in here, just in hopes that I could just sort of break that end off in one clean break. But as I suspected, the rock around here is fairly soft and it breaks and crumbles. So I took my hammer and, more importantly, my safety goggles, and I went out back and I just broke this edge off. I just knocked away at it and chipped away at it. It's a little bit flat on the other side and it's a little bit angled this way, and that is going to become the bottom, and this is going to be our key piece that sits right there. So look forward to that. I'm going to keep moving. We'll see where we go from here. Alright everybody, we are at the next stage. I actually debated whether or not to video at this segment. I really did want to just show you the tank when it was done for maximum visual appeal. But at the same time, this is all part of the process. Not considering all the time I spent collecting and scrubbing and prepping the wood and the rocks and all that. Just from yesterday evening when I sat down and started, you know, with all the rocks piled up in front of the tank, basically after that last segment of video, I spent about an hour working on it, and we've got it to this point so far. So we've still got a ways to go before we're completely there, but I've gotten a good start. We've still got a lot of bubbles. I did add more hydrogen peroxide last night after I got everything straightened out. I'd like to point out that I did drain the water about 75%. The water was only about 6 inches deep or 7 inches deep in there when I was positioning the rocks. I know you don't really tend to think of buoyancy when you think of these great big rocks, but the water does add buoyancy. You know, it does create some buoyancy on those rocks, and if you stack them in position when the tank is full and they're submerged, you are not getting a true you know, settling of the rock. And then someday if you actually do a big water change and you drain the water much lower, you could actually have some shifting because the weight adjusts due to the buoyancy. I've had this happen before. So whenever you're putting rocks, especially large rocks like these, in a tank, you always want to do it without water if possible, or as little water as possible. I'm 100% confident if I completely drained this tank, these rocks would not move a bit. And all of the larger ones are all the way down on that plastic with the gravel around them, so they are all very, very secure. Nothing is going to move anywhere in this tank, even if I drained the water out of it. So what our next step is going to be is filling in the corners, I'll say. Right now you can see where I've got the rock just kind of down in the gravel. I'm going to sort the gravel out and get it all sifted down into the corners. I've created more habitat in there than first meets the eye. We can talk about my process later once we've got it all done, but this is already going to be a long enough video. This is just sort of my progress along the way, but I wanted to give you a good look at it because we're about to go to another very important step. And the next step is going to be, as I said, filling in all the little corners. Around here, if you look at the streams or rivers, you will basically see a gravel and sandy bottom, but it's covered with smaller rocks and river stones and flat rocks. And if you look in this tank, you will see that that is not the case. I've got my main structural rocks, but the rest of the tank is simply wood and gravel. And the gravel doesn't even look like it's really, settled in or anything. So the next step is going to be all of the small rocks I went out today and collected and have finished treating. They're going to start going in on the bottom in the gravel and sort of topping off that naturalistic feel. So let's go over to my washing machine where I've got all the rocks treated, and we will have a look at what we're actually going to start working with from there. So this is what I've got that we're going to start adding in. I can always get more later, but for now this is going to be a lot of it. So I've got stuff like this that gives me lines and direction. I can move this in any position I want to create any sort of line or direction in the tank I want visually. We've got this one very much the same way. It's got some curvature to it, so that can actually look very organic around something else. We've got these nice flat ones. This one will be very good to have sticking up out of the gravel, leaning against something. That'll look very natural that way. This one, same thing. This one's actually got such a flat spot on it. It almost wants to be sticking up out of the gravel like that, and it almost stays that way without any help. And then of course I have all of these. This is a good one. When you look at the bottom of it, it's got a ton of cavity underneath of it, so that'll create habitat for any smaller animals. It'll also create surface area for more nitrifying bacteria. And if you will notice the coloration of all these rocks, they're all fairly similar to what is in the gravel already. Over time they'll probably get so covered up with all-flux and stuff that you won't even really be able to tell the difference in what they originally look like, but when we first put the tank together you're certainly going to see it. And I don't want oddball weird rocks that don't look anything like the rest of the tank, so these are all going to fit in there very nicely with the color scheme and the overall texture and feel of the tank. So I'm going to get started on this, and next look we have at the tank hopefully will be once it's all set up and ready to go, and the next stage will be getting the filter cycled in, and then we can start adding fish. Alright, I think we're done. I like the way it looks so far, and I think this is the way it's going to stay. It may change a little over time, but for the most part I think we're there. I'm really happy with the way it looks. I spent maybe another 30 minutes, 25 minutes, something like that, putting all those smaller rocks in. So let's have our final walkthrough, and we will call this good on the scaping, and we can begin moving on to the next step. So I've got quite a bit of rock in there. I've got quite a bit of habitat, a lot of areas for the fish to live and swim. You can see I've got lots of little caves and swim through areas in there. Plenty of places for darkness and shelter. So I did drain the tank again one final time to get all of the hydrogen peroxide out, or as much of it out as I could, and I lowered the water level down to about 4 or 5 inches of water, and none of the rocks shifted, none of the wood shifted. Everything is safe and steady and ready to go. So I think, to me anyway, it looks a lot better. It looks a lot more natural, having more of the rocks on the bottom. And again, I'm not able to, or even want to, recreate an outdoor environment. I simply want to be inspired by, and I want to do something based on an outdoor environment. This is a fish tank, and I do have to get in there and maintain it. I was very careful to make sure nothing is up against the glass, and I've got room to get my hand in there and wipe everything down. The only exception is this piece of wood right here is still a little buoyant on this end, and I have it sort of wedged against the glass to hold it underwater. So over time that will soak enough water in that it'll sink on its own, and I won't have to have it in there. In the meantime, however, when I get in there to do any tank maintenance, if need be, I can always just lift it up, wipe the glass down, and then wedge it back in there. Not a big deal with the wood, but I definitely don't like having rocks touching the glass, and I don't like having the water flow blocked by having anything touching the glass pretty much anywhere in the tank. Even on the ends, you can see here where the water is able to flow freely around the ends of the rock work. It's fairly wide open, so it will allow the water to flow through there fairly freely. There are some traps and areas that are going to be more or less detritus traps. Not a lot I can do about it. If you want a nice busy looking tank that's full of rocks and sticks and stuff, you're going to have areas like that, and we'll deal with it as we go, and we'll deal with tank maintenance and stuff like that. So there's your final look. Next step will be getting the filter installed and beginning to get the cycle started and all that. We can talk about that. We can talk more in depth about how I've treated the wood and how I treated the rocks before I put them in there and everything else. This has been a fun process. This has been about 4 days total, putting this video together and putting this tank together, letting it sit overnight, coming back, working on it some more, etc. So thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Hope my process might have inspired you a little bit to maybe get a little more creative when you do your tank or you do your next tank. And I will see you real soon on the next one. Thanks again for watching.